Hello! Today I'm here to bring you the first half of my September wrap-up. Who can believe it's halfway through September already? It's absolutely crazy. However, it does mean that it will be autumn soon, and that is my favourite time of year. No surprises there. I think a lot of us on BookTube seem to love autumn. Although, that said, it will soon be Christmas, which is absolutely insane and frankly petrifying. But alas, time is forever getting away with me, especially seemingly this year. Anyway, it hasn't gone too badly in terms of my reading so far this month. I have read 3 books. Some of them were terrible. One of them was a real standout book for me. So it's kind of been a month of mixed reading, but anyway, it's not been the worst, and I have enjoyed all of these books as I've been reading them, which has been a bonus. So I'm going to get straight into it by talking about The Less Than Perfect Legend of Donna by Dan Micklethwaite. This was the first Blue Moose book I read for my Paddling and Independent Publishers series, and I have done an individual review of this, which I will link down below if you want to check that out. So I won't talk about it much here. Basically, it follows Donna Oakley, who is a very reclusive person, and she tends to surround herself in books and get lost in books all the time, often to the detriment of her actual real life. She reaches a point where she realises that she can't carry on that way, and she attempts to improve her life by taking inspiration from her stories. And things can get a bit crazy in this book. I enjoyed the process of reading this. It was a really quick read, and I think the bookish stuff was enough to at least appeal to me. But the story overall was really disappointing and something of nothing, to be honest. Donna doesn't really go on any real journey, even though she's an extremely flawed person and she has some real troubles that she needs to work through. I don't feel like she did work through those issues during this book. I was actually surprised that it was published in this format, because I don't feel like it reads as a finished book. It almost reads as an incomplete manuscript that needs quite a lot of tweaking to it. Yeah, it wasn't the best. It wasn't awful. As I say, I enjoyed the process of reading it. It was really quick, and I flew through it, but it was quite falling short of the mark for me in the end, and I think I'm not alone in that opinion, because I have heard a few people say similar things about this book. So it's not the best start to the month, really. Then I completely turned things around by reading Jen Campbell's The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. This is a proof copy, very kindly sent to me by Two Roads, and it was sent with the best package I have received since I've been a child, really. There were some fantastic things in here, all relating to the book in some way. So there was a magic bean, there was a voucher to buy a heart online, there was also silver Smarties. There were just so many fun things. I adored it, and I adored this book. So this is out in the UK on the 2nd of November, and I'm sure you're all aware of who Jen is. If not, I'll link her down below. She has a fantastic channel here on YouTube, and this is her first short story collection. I have read a few of her short stories in the past, so I knew that she was very much the kind of short story writer that I enjoy. She kind of takes a lot of inspiration from fairy tales. She has magical realism-y elements in there. I was well on board to buy this, and then I very excitingly got the chance to read a proof copy, and it did not disappoint. There's such an eclectic mix of stories in this. Even though there are magical realism stories in there, they're not all magical realism. So I think it's a collection that definitely has something for a lot of people in it. The standout stories for me were Animals, which is a story about a world in which you can buy a heart, you can buy an animal heart online. I also really enjoyed Margaret and Mary and the End of the World, which kind of looks at a girl who was gotten pregnant, and it parallels her story with that of Mary. I really enjoyed the way that was done, and I also really liked the title story, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night, which is set out like kind of like a script, but it's more of a conversation, but you get the names and then what they've said after it, and it's basically looking at a couple having a sort of philosophical conversation in the middle of the night, and it's really lovely and touching and quite emotional. But to be honest, I could go on because I loved all the stories in here. There wasn't one that kind of left me feeling a bit flat, which is very rare for me. I normally find that short story collections are quite hit and miss, so I, needless to say, would really recommend this. Then I finished the month with The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I don't want to rant about this book, because I've made a vow to myself that I'm not going to rant about books anymore. But I'm going to find it really hard not to rant about this book. I finished it yesterday. I gave it 2 stars. I did not like it at all. I read my first Carlos Ruiz Zafón about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. and that was The Shadow of the Wind, which is sort of the creme de la creme of his books. This is a follow-on from that, but I don't feel like you have to have read The Shadow of the Wind to understand this. It's one of those series that it's set in the same sort of place, but it's at different time zones and it follows different people each time. I think there are references to the other book in here, although I can't really remember anything else about the other book other than a few names and a few places, and I could follow this quite easily, so I don't think it's a series that you need to read one after the other. But I didn't really like Shadow of the Wind, and I felt bad saying that because I hadn't at that time heard anything negative about Carlos Ruiz Zafón. He's one of those writers that everybody seems to be quite precious about. I kind of feel like me and Carlos Ruiz Zafón don't really get on. I don't find his prose gripping at all. I find myself zoning out all the time. He uses passive voice quite a lot, which I definitely noticed in here, which was interesting as a writer because it's the first time I've noticed how much using the passive voice just makes you turn off. But he uses passive voice a lot, and generally his books are really thick. Like, this is 500 pages, I think, and there's quite a lot of writing to a page, and I don't feel like his stories warrant it. So anyway, without further ado, I'll tell you what this is about. So Carlos Ruiz Zafón kind of writes mystery thrillers, but they all revolve around books in some way. So this is about a man called David Martin. He starts off working in a journalist office, and when he loses his job there, he signs up with a publisher, and basically he writes in a cheapy, just easy to please stories under a different name, and he kind of has no rights. He's sort of scorned by his journalist friends. They're really not impressed, and everybody kind of thinks that he's sold himself. And he gets approached by a French publisher called Corelli, who offers him a lot of money to write a book, which I won't tell you much about because I don't want to spoil anything. Needless to say, Martin agrees, and things go from there, and it all gets a bit crazy, and nothing is as it seems, and he ends up finding himself in a lot of trouble. There are a lot of things that I didn't like in this book. Predominantly, though, is the fact that nothing was resolved. You cannot write a mystery thriller and forget to resolve the issue, but I feel like what Carlos Ruiz Zafón did was he got carried away with explaining how David Martin solved the issue, that he didn't actually remember to wrap things up at all. Nothing is resolved, so you put a lot of effort into reading this. Like, it was a slog, it was quite boring at times, and I really just wanted it to be over for the last 300 pages. And then there's just no reward, and it made me so angry. It made me angry. Oh, it did. No, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed probably half of this. I did enjoy the process. Like, I love the writery stuff, and I love the book references, and there's kind of a lot of Great Expectation-esque kind of theme in here, which I really enjoyed. The ending just was ridiculous, and I very much remember that is the feeling that I had with Shadow of the Wind. I just feel like Carlos Ruiz Zafón is not only quite a slow writer, but he also isn't very good at making his mysteries come together, which seems to me to be a real flaw for a mystery thriller writer, which is so devastating because bookish mysteries should just be the best thing in the world, and they're just not. I was really annoyed with this, and I'm kind of sad that I wasted the time reading it, but alas, I did, and it's done. So that's what I read so far. As you can see, it's not been the best month, although obviously within it I read one of the best books that I've read this year, so it could have been a lot worse. Please let me know down below what you have been reading so far this month, and I will see you next time. Bye!